Hey, what's up? I'm Mike DeVries.
I'm Nate Sigurd.
We're here at my shop, MD Tattoo Studio, and we're going to show you how to do a tattoo of a gorilla step by step. We're going to go through Photoshop, technique, machines, ink, everything. This has the green back here, but we could add that on this one. No matter what, we're going to stick some like kind of out of focus shrubbery around it. Just kind of some green stuff, and we'll go over that on Photoshop. But we'll just start with figuring out which one looks the best on your leg first, and then we could go from there. What I always do is I'll always have like 3 different sizes: small, medium, and large. And then I hold it onto your leg and go from there as far as size. So I'll go, that one's the small one, and it looks decent. You never want to go too small on the leg because it's something that it's usually viewed from a farther distance. You know, it's not like your arm that I can go here, check it out. It's usually a farther distance from the viewer, so bigger is better. You usually want to be able to see that thing from as far away as possible. You know, it's always just more striking. Okay, so I'm going to go straight with the big one. This is the big one. Go about there, and then we'll bring in some out of focus leaves and whatnot on this side. I think that's a good one. Alright, now that we figured out which one we're doing, this one needs to get a little bit bigger. But before that, might as well do some of that green stuff around it. Pick a green. You hold Option and click, you could change the color. Use the brackets to change the size. So instead of driving myself nuts trying to do all of this hair, we're gonna just bring in some leaves. Some blurry stuff. Dark. Change the opacity just by pressing the numbers. Go press like 4 and it changes it to 40%. Just like lighter. It's also something that I could just draw on, but I have a lot of fun with Photoshop, so that's why I like to do it. But even though I'm photoshopping it like this, doesn't mean that I'm gonna do it exactly like this. I'll kind of change it up, but gives you an idea. So I'm just pressing Option to grab colors up here. All of this probably isn't even going to get tattooed because it's going to be way behind your leg. We're going to be more focused here. See, if you look, like this is kind of what I'm going to try and achieve. Change the opacity, want to lower it, just press 1 and it's going to be really light. Another thing that I like to do too is use this burn tool. Click on this, burn, and it helps you kind of bump up the contrast and the values. Like I'm gonna darken back here. Change the exposure higher. Kind of burn some of this stuff. which I'm not going to be doing all of that either, but let's see. You could also do the opposite of that, which is the dodge tool, which will lighten things. Which you could do in smaller. This is something that you don't really need to do in Photoshop unless you want to just play around and see what you could do, but I kind of tend to do it just when I'm tattooing. I know, you know, just lighten certain areas, darken certain areas to give it that high contrast. What I don't like here is this hair right here is almost kind of the same values as this background here. So I either need to darken the background a lot or darken the edge of this hair. So I think I'm gonna just burn the edge of the hair. And when I tattoo it, I'll do a softer green back there. See some of his hair. This already has really good high contrast, so I don't really need to add too much more. Another cool thing to do, almost with any picture of reference that somebody brings me a picture of their son, or it's a movie character, whatever the case may be, if I go into image, adjustments, color balance, and just add more blue, it adds a lot of blue and darkness, but it also makes it a little richer looking, so if you tattoo it like that, it'll make for a better looking tattoo. And it also adds to that value and contrast too, which is really good. Sometimes it might be too much. I mean, you could definitely go too much, but you know, you could almost tattoo it like that and it'd be cool. I like using a lot of blue, as you guys probably already know. Let's see, I'll burn some of that hair a little bit more. I mean, you can get it to the point where it's too much. If you press Option Command Z, it goes step backwards. Command Shift Z is step forward. It's just little tricks. Just go and step backwards. Lower the exposure, just press, let's say, changes that to 30%. If I want like 60%, I'll just press 6 and it changes that. Probably add some more green. Opacity higher. Probably not going to do any of that. I mean, this is just going to have just a little bit of light green back there. This will have some dark and light. So usually I'll look at the edge, and it kind of already looked a little bit darker on the edge of the hair, so that's where I'll choose to go lighter on the other side if it's darker on this edge. If the hair was white here, then I would go darker on the outside. Seems like the majority of things that I do, it ends up being more dark on the outside, and it kind of acts as its outline. More of chunks of darkness on the outside rather than just one line holding your piece in place.
Right.
But it also works the same way, going dark to light in this direction. So this is catching my attention because all these hairs are kind of getting lost with the hair that's behind there. So now I need to choose whether or not I want to lighten these hairs, which I guess that's kind of a no-brainer because it already looks lighter, this looks darker. So I could take my dodge tool, use the brackets, make it a little bit bigger, and now I'm just kind of highlighting the hairs down there. You know, something like that. So now that's not getting lost, the transition, you know, face and the fur behind him. Just for the heck of it, we'll kind of see what happens if we go like that. Yeah, I mean, that looks pretty nice too. So then I'll probably take, instead of bringing this green all the way down, I'll probably have fur coming this way, and then I'll have to, you know, I'll probably have lighter fur here and then dark green on that side, so it stands out too. So I'll use like that, this light fur here, and I'm gonna darken kind of behind it. So it's gonna transition from dark, holding in this fur, to light, and then this darkness is gonna hold in the face on the opposite side. I probably want to go a little bit more. I mean, but it's also easy. I could stencil this, stick it on your leg, and just kind of
add that with a Sharpie.
With a Sharpie too, but this just goes to, I just like playing in Photoshop. It's fun. But I want to show a couple other things that are really useful too. For example, if somebody, let's say, brings me a photo of this girl and they want it in color, I used to just make up the colors in my head and just print this out and just tattoo it. Which, if you could do that, that's cool. But there's also easy ways to go to Image, Adjustments, Hue, Saturation, and there's a little Colorize button right here. And then you could get it kind of close to, you know, some skin tone. Let's see. And then I could go to Image Adjustments, Color Balance, like what I was talking about using the blue. Just gonna turn it gray, but you could kind of. Then I would take the burn tool. This face looks way too washed out. If I were to tattoo it like this, it would just fall apart. So it's either you could do it when you're just tattooing, just bump up the contrast, or here you could do it in Photoshop, you know. So I'm just kind of burning this nose a little bit, so when I tattoo it, it's going to pop out more. And another thing too, when I tattoo, if I were to tattoo this, this has a lot of like dark brown in here, I would just darken that, go black, so it's gonna hold up better over time with that, you know. I've been seeing a lot of different portraits coming back healed, ones that I've done, ones that other people have done, you know, portraits that I have on my body, and it's really important to do this, to really bump it up, so, you know, this chin isn't gonna get lost from there. It's almost kind of like outlining it, but you're doing it in chunks of color, whether or not it's black or a dark color, it needs it, you know. One rule of thumb is the upper lip is usually always darker than the bottom. That might be a little bit too much, but I mean, I could take this and go huge and go one click on it and it kind of bumps it up too, you know. And then again, on the flip side to that, you go dodge tool, and I could burn in some, or dodge some color, or white highlights in there too, which kind of adds to the bumping up the contrast and stuff. I think the exposure is too high. Lower that. So you could tell that it's kind of starting to pop out. The nose is starting to come forward. That's what you want. You want it to come forward. That shows you with the original. There again, then gotta figure out what color her eyes are. If it's somebody that the person, if it's a family member, I would ask what color are the eyes. Then you could even go to the brush tool and pick on some color. Let's say it's blue. could... I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do this. This is just one way, easy ways that I've found to do it, you know. Could even add a little bit of red into the lips. Let's go maybe like a pink. Can make it even lower the opacity. Press 1, so now it's just 10%, it's real light. I mean, if I wanted it perfect, I would obviously spend a lot more time sitting here, you know. Now the teeth look a little pink, but I could go back and change that or be more precise, you know. I could even add a little bit of pink to her cheeks, you know. That's one way to do it. But the most important thing is bumping up the contrast. Another thing that I do a lot too is go to Image, Adjustments, and Curves, and just bring this down. And this also bumps up the contrast even more. Just pulling that down. And just lately I've been bumping up that contrast a lot more. It just, what it does is it holds the face in place really good, adds more contrast to make it look more striking from distance, and it holds up better over time. So it's kind of like just a good thing to do, just in general. Just makes it look better and last a lot longer. So I'm going to X out of that. Well, here's another thing that's really good to do also is taking your own photo reference. You know, because if somebody came to you and wanted this gun, rather than Googling it and doing a gun that possibly, you know, a bunch of other people have access to and might have tattooed it or could tattoo it. So here this guy wanted a gun, so I told him to bring it in, because he at first said, you know, we could probably find it online, but I suggested bring the gun in and we're going to do a little photo shoot. So I, you know, was able to get the right angle that I wanted, and it's going to be more my own, you know. And then I took it into Photoshop and did everything that I kind of just showed you. One important thing was adjustments, go to that color balance and add a lot more blue, which if you do that, try it out, you'll notice that it really helps. Especially with realistic tattoos. It's, you know, if somebody wants a rose, I mean, if I were to draw a rose, it's not going to be fully realistic. I mean, it's kind of weird because kind of when I draw, it ends up being a little new school with realistic elements to it. But if it's straight realistic, I mean, yeah, the easiest thing to do is to go on Google rose, and then the best ones that pop up, I'm sure a million people have done them already. But you could go in your backyard or your neighbor's house that has a rose bush and take some, you know, shots of it yourself, and now you'll stand out rather than doing the same thing, you know. And it comes down to like famous people too, and doing movie captures is really important, or screenshots is really good. So, you know, if somebody came to me and said that they wanted a portrait of the Terminator, well, Google's going to have all the ones that everybody's done already. So there's ways to go ahead and throw in the movie and do screen captures. You could do a widget like on your dashboard. This right here will you could do a full screen grab. You could Google that and get that widget, and so I'd be able to get a different picture of the Terminator that nobody's done before. Extremely important, yeah. Especially if you're an upcoming guy and you want to stand out, just, you know, do different things. It's really going to help. It's just going the extra step, you know, the extra mile. Alright, here's a little trick that I want to show you that I've been trying to figure out a solution for it, and actually tried it a few days ago, and it works really well. I'm going to go ahead and grab this same image that I used earlier. Usually, if you've done portraits, you probably know what I'm talking about. The issue when you have your printout, your reference, your stencil, put it on somebody, you're wrapping the body, or let's say it's on an arm, and it's round. So you're putting something flat and going around something round. And the problem
when you peel your stencil off, you look at it, the person could look longer and skinnier just because of what's happening. So I figured I wanted to try something like this, to where take the face, press Command T, which another way to get into that free transform is just go into here, transform, and then you got options here. You could like warp things or do perspective, but what we're gonna do is just Command T, free transform, and I'm gonna take this and make the face wider like that, and I'll go on the side. So even though it looks weird on the screen, don't worry about that. Print it, make your stencil from this, and then when you place a stencil on a round limb, it's going to come out looking more accurate like the person than if you didn't do this. So, and I tried it a few days ago and it works really good. So it's a little trick that I wanted to let everybody know about. Anytime I print something, I'll print 3 different sizes, small, medium, large size. We pretty much have already gone over that as far as size and placement. So you could either change the numbers here to go bigger or smaller, or you could just click this to go bigger or smaller. So I'm gonna go about there. I'll end up printing a couple. It's got a few options: photo paper, plain paper. It already has the option of plain paper best right there. I think maybe if it's an older computer or not updated, it might not have this option. So then you go here, go to paper type quality, pick your paper, pick best. I always print stuff on best. And then I'll also print a copy on photo paper. And what that does is I'll actually show you the difference between it. It actually adds even more contrast to it. And then you use the printout on the photo paper as your reference. Alright, let's print that and get the stenciling. I just use a HP Photosmart. It's a C8 180 all-in-one. They're decent. I like them. There's a lot of other good ones out there too, though. Woo! I'm not too worried about trying to get every hair that's on my reference paper exactly the way it is. I'm actually kind of making it a little bit easier, because all this tiny little hairs, it's just going to be kind of a nightmare when you tattoo it, so might as well simplify it so you don't go crazy. And I think sometimes simplifying it is better anyway, you know. Sometimes less is more. And I'm pushing really hard to get a lot of that carbon copy on there. And I found that this pencil, Prismacolor Turquoise, letter H, is the best one. The tip never breaks off. And I have this here. I have my copy on photo paper if I want to reference anything, because it's a better printout. This picture here is pretty solid though, so a lot of times it'll be like somebody will bring a portrait of their little girl or, you know, grandparent or something, and it's not the greatest picture, but when you print it on photo paper you could make out things a lot easier. Here again, I'm not really worried about exactly what this blurry leafy stuff is doing, because I'll probably make up something when I do it a little bit different anyway.
know in my other video I probably said make sure that you stencil every single little detail, but I've definitely changed since even just my last DVD, and it really wasn't that long ago. But you know, I think that as an artist it's good to evolve and, you know, just keep trying to get better. The biggest thing that has changed with my artwork is just bumping up that contrast and making sure that the pieces are going to hold up over time, you know. I kept hearing it like, oh, those pieces aren't going to hold up that great over time, da 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 da, but, and I would argue the fact on what will hold up better over time, like a chunk of black that's in a background holding in a face, or is it going to be just a line that holds up better over time? Because any pieces that I've seen that are 50 years old, it's usually that line is all blown out, or just, you know, it starts to like separate and spread out. So I don't know, I kind of think that big chunks of color would hold up better. I often I'll go ahead and cross hatch some dark areas, so I know, like, I think that if you spend an extra 10 minutes to make your stencil, it could save an hour of tattoo time just by making it very clear that when you do it, that you know exactly where your darks are going, where your lights are going, and what is what. So that's why I'll make little X's that mark solid black spots. You know, this cross hatching, I know that it's going to get shaded off of that line, dark, lighter that direction. I do that a lot, like if it's big smoother areas, you know, it's good to do some cross hatching. And I also do a lot of cross hatching when I'm tattooing to get things smooth. Because you'll go one direction and then you see all these needle marks. If you come the other direction, it's just like drawing. The more that you cross hatch, the smoother that it could become. I'll definitely refer back to the photo a lot, but as far as like all these little lines, some of it I'll probably do with a liner, some of it I'll do with like the going sideways like on a mag. I change things up so often that one piece I'll do a lot of like little details with my liner, then the next day I'll do it all with like a 7 mag, the next day I might do it with, you know, my 17 mag, so it constantly changes. Every piece is different. You know, there's just so many different ways to do things. I mean, the main thing about this is I'm basically just building a grid that is going to help me to pull this off. So the more educated that I am with this gorilla and what wrinkles he has, his nose, where the shadows are, where the highlights are, it's going to help the process when I tattoo. Just kind of making hairs up, you know, and when I tattoo it I'll make it up even more. Just because I made a line right here on my stencil doesn't mean that I have to put a hair right there, you know. It's, for one, it's a gorilla, and for two, I'm never really like super crazy on making sure every hair is in place, you know. Because as soon as this gorilla turns and then comes back to the, if you were to get another photo, his hairs are going to be different. So it's not that big of a deal, you know. Some people try and copy the picture like exactly, you know, to get a realistic tattoo, but that's not really the case. Because you kind of got to think about it. If it was just copying, then why isn't everybody really good at it? Because copying, you know, sounds really easy. But I think it just goes more than that. Because I'm changing the hairs, I'm going to change the color, I'm going to add more wrinkles here, I'm going to, you know, get crazy with it. And here, like, on this print, I can't really see what's going on in this area, so I'm referring to this print that was on photo paper. I could see a little bit better what's going on in that area. The way I grid this out and spend so much time on it, like, I could almost do this entire tattoo without even looking at my reference if I really wanted to, just because of how mapped in it is, you know? Like, I know that this is going to be black shaded off this way. That X marks the spot, I know black's going to go there. You know, I've spent so much time on it that I know where everything's going to go, you know? Which it might even evolve to that later on, you know, where I'll get it ready just like this and then not even look at the reference. So even more of it is going to be made up, you know. Another thing that I'll do is put circles where my highlights are, or where I think that they should be. I could see them better here. Here I can't see them as good, but I know that this is where I want some highlights. Right here. They could either be circles or long ovals. It's also kind of like when you look at a mountain on a map, or the grid where it shows. When you look at a topography map, you see how, you know, this is darker, then it's lighter, then it's lighter, then it's lighter. That's almost kind of what I do, where this is darker, mid-tone, and then the circles are my, you know, parts that are closest or that has a shine on it. I usually press even harder when I'm doing like the eyes, nose, and the lips on a face, because that's the last thing that you want coming off. I pretty much treat animal portraits just like human portraits. Like, my color palette is almost identical. It's pretty funny. When I pour my palette out, I definitely don't skimp on color, you know, trying to save a buck. I do waste a lot of ink, that's a fact. But I think it's better to have it out than not have it out and, you know, be like, oh, I need to stop because I need to get out purple, but you might sacrifice it and just use blue or, you know, color that you have out. So I think if you get out all the colors, then there's no reason for you to skimp anywhere. The main difference between animals and humans, I mean, it kind of depends on the animal. As far as a gorilla, I mean, I don't have to be as precise, like with wrinkles and hair. You know, if I'm doing a portrait of somebody's grandma, I have to be a little bit more precise on what wrinkles, you know, I need to do. Because you need to make it look like the person. When you do an animal, you don't even have to worry about that. It was, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I did that one gorilla with, or maybe it was a chimp actually, with the shiny tongue. And ever since I did that, like, everybody wanted a gorilla. And it's funny, when I talk to certain people, they think that I'm like a gorilla fanatic, that, you know, I'm like this huge fan of the animal, which, I mean, they are very intriguing and awesome, but that's not the reason that I started tattooing gorillas. It was because I did one good one and then everybody wants a monkey or a gorilla. But they are extremely fun though, and I love tattooing them. They have so much expression, and I try and capture that, you know. I mean, I've done a lot of other animals too, but definitely primates are definitely my favorite. My least favorite are wolves and bears. Short hair. It's just a pain in the butt, you know. Tedious. And usually like a bear or a wolf, like, unless their mouth is open, then it's just a bunch of like hair. They have beady little eyes, like a bear for example. Like if it's just, he's just got these little beady eyes, and it's like, it just doesn't do a whole lot for me, you know. I like animals where there's more than that, more than just hair, you know. This one has actual skin and wrinkles and almost like human eyes. Alright, I think we're good. Yeah, we'll tuck it up kind of high, so you're definitely going to have some room under there for something. So, where I think I like it, then I'll take hand sanitizer, put it on a paper towel. And it does two things. It gets off this excess carbon there, and then it also, the alcohol that's in this helps dry out the skin, and also, you know, cleans it really good too. Dries out the skin so the stencil holds on there even better. I've noticed that certain cities where it's really a lot of kind of damp, stencil will come off easier. So the drier the skin, the better. Or I should say where areas where it's really humid, stencil could come off even more, so it's really important to get that thing real dry. Of course, stencil stuff. Best way to apply a stencil. You don't need a lot. Yeah, that's more than enough. Rub it in like lotion. You don't want it too wet, you don't want big puddles here and there. Not too dry either, just kind of good consistency. And I spread it kind of all over just because it's just helping it get smoother and less in this area. Okay. Try to relax your legs, so yeah, that's good. Now I'll kind of line it up with my reference lines there, but don't always hold yourself to that. It doesn't have to go exactly where you made your marks, because
You might like it better twisted a little bit. And of course, you don't want to double press it. Alright, there it is. Alright, let's go check it out in the mirror. Let me know what you think. Always want to use distilled water. I always get out 3 cups. It's kind of like for my darks, my mid-tones, and my whites or yellows, you know, really light colors. These are new tubes made by Mithra that they're full disposable and they come with the metal. They're awesome. I just got them a few days ago and it seems like, I mean, I used to use metal tubes and then I started using disposables for the last few years, and this is a big difference. Especially with my liner tube. It's pretty awesome. For my 17 mag, 9 mag bug pin, 5 liner. These things are also awesome. They saved my life. My hands, I mean, I don't know how people have been tattooing for 40 years still tattooing. It's crazy. Like, my hands are already starting to hurt. But these things are great because it reduces vibration, and it also helps me hold on to these little plastic tubes a lot better too, better grip. But these are disposable, so they're cheap, only about, I think, 70 cents each. They're fantastic. I love those guys. I bend that little edge so it's easier to take off later on. I'll do 9 mag bug pin, which fits in a 7 tube. 17 mag bug pin fits in a 15 tube. And I always look at the point on these things to see, you know, that's going to be pretty much how big your line is going to be. And depending on the piece that I'm doing, if I want to, you know, some finer lines or fatter. But usually it's a 5 regular type from Mithra's pretty good. I always use the eye loop. I just do it without even opening the package first. I could pretty much see everything that's going on. That one looks good. I'm looking for barbed, fish hook ends on there that you don't want. That's good. Let me check this one. That's good. Good to go. Usually put my bend, a little bend in the back, and right where the solder is I'll put another little bend. I think I put a bigger bend in my needles than a lot of people do. A lot of people say, wow, you put a big bend on your needle, but I don't know, I just like it that way. Usually if I don't, then it'll rattle around in the tube, and then I'll end up having to stick another rubber band, and then that just slows down my machine. So I'd rather have a pretty good bend, especially with my bigger mag. That's pretty bent. There. Now the liner, I've noticed, don't need as big of a bend because I use the diamond tip on these guys, so it's actually got like a little, spot that it stands still, stays in place. So it's good. I'm not using a metal tip disposable for my 17 mag here because they don't make them yet, or else I would be using it. Alright, now on to machines. Got Numa hybrids, Numa 2s, Hyperstigmas. I just got a couple of machines that I'm really stoked on from Aaron Kane. Only place you could get them is eBay. They're really cool, but they hit a little bit too hard for my liking. But if I'm just packing in something, doing minimal layers, I'll get those out. My favorites are these machines made by Iko, I-K-O. He's from France. These are probably my favorites. Yeah, they're solid machines. So I'm going to use this one. Made by Iko. I'm going to use it for my 17 mag, my big shader. And I recently just got a couple machines from FK Irons, and I forget the name of this one. It's like the Pyro or Exactor. Should probably look up that name. I'll get that name and I'll mention it later. But this is a liner that he sent me out, and really stoked on it right now. And I actually recently just got this too from Alex DePassy, and I'm not sure what I'm going to use today, but this one's set up. It's really soft, so I haven't used it yet, but I have a feeling I'm really going to like it. So I got that out. What's that? This is my big struggle on what the heck should I use. I feel like if I'm going to do a real soft portrait of a baby or little kid, Numa hybrids or a Hyperstigma, it's a little bit softer. I'd be able to layer and get real soft blends. I mean, I could still do it on these ones. Just usually like right when you're done, it looks like the skin is a little bit more irritated than with this. For that finished picture, it's better if the person comes back the next day or when it's healed. But I've been standing away from the Numas a little bit more than usual because of the whole compressor issue mostly. I've been traveling a lot, so I'm not, I'm done taking a compressor with me. It's just too much.
I've been using the Hyperstigmas a lot lately too, and they're really good machines. I've been going back and forth mostly between the Stigmas and my coils. One good setup that I've been doing is my big 17 mag. I'll use, coil, smaller mag, like my 9 mag bug pin. I'll use the Stigma. It seems like they're definitely more consistent than anything that I've used, and I could get, in real small little crevices and details with this. And then I like my big mag because I could really, get in there and do some big blends with that. These also work really good for lining and little things too, so these are really cool. It might become a day where, that's all I use. Yeah, so what am I going to use? It's nice to have a lot of options. I think I'm going to go ahead and try out this new Alex DePasse for my small mag. I like to stretch out my rubber bands. I use 2 rubber bands. I like to stretch them out pretty good so it's not causing so much resistance. I usually go with the paper towel for the grommet. I haven't noticed a huge difference actually, like with the outcome of the tattoo. Some people say that this is a little bit softer hitting, but I really haven't noticed a difference. But it's easier to just throw these on, plus you just throw them away when you're done. I get these rubber bands just sitting on there as natural as possible. You don't want them all bundled up or intertwined. It's nice to just have them sitting just perfectly like that. Alright, one down. Yeah, that works. Check and make sure that it's sitting in there flat. See, a lot of guys just set it up like that, and then they just get to work, I like to actually set it up and then maybe make a readjustment to the way that I just had it set. Bring it up just a little bit. That's good. Nice and soft. Just a little bit too far. I usually do about maybe between a dime and a nickel's width of my needle hangout. Yeah, it's probably about a nickel's width. Alright, looking good. Alright. It's always good to wrap your machine. What I'll do is I'll get it about to this point, then I'll put some hand sanitizer in here, kind of squish it around, and then slip it on. If you don't use some sort of lubricant, you can't get that thing on. Bagging your machines is a great habit to get into. I know a lot of guys don't do it, but extra precaution is always better. And I'm going to take some hand sanitizer in here, squish it around a little bit, and stick it over that grip there. So without that hand sanitizer, or some sort of lubricant, you can't get it on. Slips on nice and easy. I'll take off some of that excess because it pushes it all to here. If not, my hand gets all slippery down there. Alright, that one's good to go. Alright, machines are ready.
All we need is ink now. Let's pour out some ink now. Got a lot of ink, mostly intense. There's some, some good flesh colors by Millennium. Great flesh color by Intense Flesh Pot. Sienna is a really nice, like a mid-tone for portraits. I got more ink here. Fusion, I've been using a lot of Fusion lately. It's good stuff. So I'm going to start out with black, which is my talons. Probably going to need a lot of black, so I'm going to go ahead and pour out 2 caps of that. There are blacks that are blacker than this, like Intense True Black, Fusion inks, I think it's the Triple Black or Power Black. They're definitely blacker, but that's something if I go back into a piece the second time, I might get out some Power Black. I mean, Talons is dark enough. Sometimes the ones that are too black, it just, I don't know, makes a mess, just pisses me off. Pretty much going to get out all different colors. There's going to be a lot of blues, mostly in the face, obviously. Mean Green, Millennium, this is green. When I pour my ink, I'll go dark to light on my palette. So I know like kind of where I'm reaching and what color's what. So if I'll have like a medium blue next to the dark blue, then I know that that dark blue is blue and not a dark green or a dark purple, because they all kind of look the same. So green is pretty cool. Power Purple. I use purple a lot. I really like using it like in my shadows and dark areas. Like on a portrait, if let's say something is a dark brown, I'll almost just use straight dark purple, or I'll take my dark brown and mix it with dark purple to richen it up a little bit. Deep purple. It's another good one to dip your browns into this color as well. Just richens it up a little bit. One of my favorite lavender type colors is Grape from Intense. A lot of people ask me like what kind of ink that I use, and it's like, it's a bunch of different companies that I like. There's certain colors that I like better out of each brand. This is one of my all-time favorite colors, is Dusty Rose from Eternal. It's great for like lips, or like the parts of the eyes, like the inner canthus or the bottom where it's kind of pinkish color. Gums, tongue. It's great for all that type of stuff. As far as like a dark brown, I found that Fusion is really good, Intense is great.
far as dark browns, I really haven't found one that's like dominates another one. But this power brown is pretty good. Dark magenta. So I go from dark to light, so I'm putting a dark magenta next to my pink, so it's kind of like my dark, medium, and light. Kind of like gives me my like value ranges. This is another brown that I like. It's from Fusion. It's just called Brown. A similar color made by Intense. It's, I think, Intense Dark Brown. It's very similar. Both really good. It's kind of almost like a reddish brown. And I would be doing the exact same thing if I was doing a portrait of somebody. Same colors. Except I'll use more of certain colors for an animal versus the human. Light blue, Fusion, really good. As far as periwinkle, there's a few companies that have it. My favorite, though, is from Intense. It's a little bit more gray, which I like. Some of the other ones are a little bit too bright. This is that sienna color I was talking about. Probably use it here and there on the hair for this gorilla. Flesh pot. Even though he doesn't have a lot of flesh, this is kind of a good ending for kind of dark, medium, light for hair. Get out one that I'm probably going to mix and get all muddied up from like these. And then a clean one, you know. I might not use it that much, but like I was saying earlier, the more that you get out, the better, just in case. So you might see some color they don't even use. As far as a bright yellow, probably a star bright yellow is the canary yellow, still probably the brightest that you could possibly get. But this atomic yellow, close competitor. I like it. Always get out a bunch of caps of white. What I'll do is I'll intermix these with this white, so this will get polluted with browns. This one will get polluted with like blue, so it stays within the same family. This one will get polluted by, you know, some purples and pinks. This one will be, you know, if I want to get greens lighter, I'll dip in that one. So it kind of keeps everything consistent and doesn't muddy up anything. Power Blue Fusion. Another really good one is from Intense. I think it's Mario's Blue. Good blue. This one's good though too. I don't think it's the ink that will make or break you as an artist or to do good tattoos, you know. It's good to see all the different types of ink that I use. How you use the ink. Probably not going to use it, but I'm going to get out a little bit of orange. Actually, I might mix it up with a little bit of brown for his eyes. Or I almost forgot, royal blue infusion, really good blue.
Another orange that I like, sometimes the oranges are just too bright. Intense has an orange called hard orange. This is a newer bottle, it looks a little bit brighter. This is an older one, but I like it that it's not as bright. As far as reds, my all-time favorite red is Crimson Red from Eternal. Great for like lips, pin-up lips, you know, or anything red, fire. Another color that I like a lot is Wild Orchid from Eternal. It's kind of like a weird mucky burgundy, I guess. This is good for like dark parts of like inside of a mouth. I just need a dark red. Brick red, excuse me. If I need to get this color a little bit darker, I'll dip in like that dark purple, power purple. I'll use those dark purple colors to almost like darken anything if I need something darkened. Keeps it more rich rather than just using straight black. But I do use a lot of straight black too. I think it's real important. I think we're good to go as far as the ink setup. Actually, forgot one thing. This is a newer product. Silverback makes it. It's called Silverback Clear. What it does is, I used to put distilled water on top of all the colors, like 1 drop. This, he recommends that you use 3 or 4 drops. What it does is it helps the ink, you know, actually come out a little bit smoother. And also, the ink won't dry up and the cap is fast. On some of the real thin colors, I might not put any. Like yellow is really thin. I wouldn't put any. But so far I've been liking this stuff. I've only used it a few times. Normally I'll just use distilled water. Alright, good to go.
All right. I'm going to start with this darkness that's behind these hairs, because it's dark, you know, behind them. So. Using my 17 mag bug pin. You'll see that I'll probably use it for most of this tattoo. Even if it's a small little portrait, I'll use this almost the entire time. Just by using the edges. Because it's almost like I'm using like a little 5 mag or 7 mag, because I'm just only using the, you know, just the edge of it. What I like about that is that one side is darker and then one side gets kind of feathered out.
Why the 17 bug pin, not 15 regular?
The bug pins are a fairly new thing, I guess. It was, I mean, there were certain breaking points, I think, in my career that one was first, you know, I started using the 15 mag, just straight 15 mag. And then I was introduced to the 15 mag curved, where it's curved on the edges, which really helps soften things up. So I was on that for a good little while. Then I was introduced to the 17 mag bug pin, which I think I said it already, it fits in the 15 mag tube, so it's the same size. But the bug pins are smaller needles, and so there's smaller gaps in between the needles. So it actually gets things even smoother. And these are curved also. And the same goes with my 9 mag bug pin, fits in the 7 mag tube. But it really helps with getting things smooth. There are people that say that it's harder to get the ink in with bug pins, but I don't really see that. So it's cool that I'm tattooing Nate because he's a tattoo artist, and I printed out a list of topics that I usually talk about in my seminars. So a bunch of like questions and little key points and you know, thoughts. So I gave him the list. So he's gonna, you know, ask questions here and there, or bring up certain points and kind of keep things rolling so I don't completely bore you guys to death.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Nate.
So, when you start a tattoo, you start on one side and you work your way across it?
Typically, I mean, we all are taught that you start from the bottom and you work your way up, right? So, I mean, that's still, I still do that, but what I'll usually do is I'll work around the entire thing, usually. What that usually does is it's almost kind of like I'm outlining it, but I'm doing it with my mag and shading it in. I mean, on occasion I'll use a liner to, you know, to line an edge, but for the most part I use my mag and the edge of it. So you'll probably see me kind of, I mean, things change, like I'll could say one thing, you know, but it's possible I might change my mind and start going into the face a little bit before I go all the way around. But typically, I'll start at the bottom with my darks, you know, if it's a portrait of somebody. I'll start with the shirt, and then I'll do all the background. Sometimes I'll even do the hair, and then I'll go back down to the neck and start to work my way up.
Do you have problems going back to spots where you've already worked before?
No, I don't really have any problems with it. I mean,
is there a reason that it's easy for you to go back over it? Because
because you've taken better care of tattooing it, it doesn't get as irritated?
I mean, this machine is hitting really soft. So, and I mean, the ink's pretty much just flying in. I mean, I usually won't go over an area that has been, you know, too damaged. You know, you still want to be careful, you know. If I usually leave something unfinished, it's definitely usually like the highlights, or it's blended so soft that the damage hasn't been quite done yet, so I could, you know, go back and kind of smooth things out, soften things, you know. So I'm transitioning from my black, and I started dipping into the periwinkle. A lot of times you'll notice that I don't even clean this thing out when I go into other colors. You know, it just helps with that smooth transition. A lot of times I'll dip in the water, keeps it nice and lubed in there. You could also do that when you want something really soft. Go straight from periwinkle to like this light blue. Since there's going to be a lot of blue on the face, I want to make sure there's some blue on his fur underneath him. You always want to have your colors flowing. Like if you have some certain colors here, you want them here, you want them here. If there's colors here, you want them, you know, dividing it up, making sure that it's all flowing throughout the whole thing. Talks about that in my book section. I think it's called keeping your colors flowing. It's really important. So there I just went from periwinkle to this light blue into white. I'm not going to get too light with my white just yet because I'm going to be working with a lot of dark colors, so I don't want to pollute those light areas.
So you're leaving spaces where all the hairs are going to go?
Yes.
And you're taking the time to make sure that every section that you touch is completely finished before moving on? You don't leave any unfinished edges where you're working?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little unfinished. I still haven't quite decided, you know, like I was saying earlier, just because it's here doesn't mean that I have to do it here, and I always change things a lot. Right here, there's a transition at the bottom where these leaves are down here. I haven't quite decided if I want to keep them negative or stick some green there. I'm probably going to stick some green there though, like the picture. But that's just thoughts that are coming to me on what I want to do there. Also, another thought here is there's darkness behind here, the hairs here, but then the hairs get darker over here because the fur underneath him is lighter. So I have a choice to make on whether or not I want to continue this darkness behind those hairs so that hair pops out more, or just transition it into darker hairs. I think what I'm going to do is keep the darkness behind the hairs, just keep it going.
does painting help your tattooing?
You know, I wish I had more time to paint, but when I do, it definitely helps a lot. I think doing any type of art, whether or not it's painting or, you know, drawing, you know, with colored pencils or anything. I mean, especially if you want to practice doing color work, and I mean, that's a great time to practice. Like if you want, you know, if you're nervous about doing portraits on skin, do them on paper with colored pencil or a painting. If you could do it on a painting, you could do it on skin. So I'm just gonna keep going back and forth in my mind on whether or not if I want to start the green, but as I said, I'm gonna just keep continuing with some black. This side of his face is gonna be pretty dark. I'm gonna bump up the contrast even more, just make it a little bit more extreme. And work with the hairs too as I'm doing that. Little tricks to hair, says it in my book and I think my last video, but there's a lot of like V shapes, you know? Like upside down V is basically what that is. That shape that I just made. But here's a V that's right side up, you know? Another trick with hair, I mean, you don't want to just do one color. Like a lot of people will say, blonde hair, let's get out yellow. But that just doesn't work like that. Especially for blonde hair, I usually use the least amount of yellow. And I'll use like, I mean, especially stay away from like super bright yellows because it just looks fake. But you know, ochres and some browns, and could even get away with doing like lavenders and periwinkle and a lot of white, just a little bit of yellow, you know, orange, but whited down a lot. But main thing is you want to use more than one color. Like you almost want to have like a dark, medium, and light tone in pretty much every element of something that you want realistic. It's getting that full value range, and that's like one of the most important things. It's having your dark, your midtones, your lights, and you know, your fair amount of black and white, you know? Because there's black and white definitely in real life, you know? It's highlights on everything. So you gotta use your whites. And I always get a little bit more extreme with that too. Like I'll make my darks even darker than they're supposed to be and my whites even whiter, like add more. You know, there's sometimes you want to be careful if the skin is too dark, then less white is good. You know, just do it where it counts and where you need it. I think one important thing, you know, people ask me like, how do you get things so smooth? I think it's the needle, like the movements, because, you know, I think even as how I was taught to tattoo, you know, it's like little circles, you know, but I go more back and forth like that.
Do you crosshatch?
Yeah, I'll cross hatch it too. If I'm struggling to get something smooth, I'll go ahead and, I just went that direction and you see lines. Then if I go this direction, they should be a little bit more hidden. And you can go back and forth like that too.
Do you think that the direction you're putting the ink in with your needle is as important as where you're putting it?
Yeah, I think my angle of it too. Like I'm usually never fully flat with all the needles in at the same time. I'm usually leaning a little bit on one edge. Like if I'm going here, I'm leaning this way a little bit more. If I'm going on this edge of this leaf, I'm leaning this way a little bit. I do that a lot. And a biggie is taking your time. Like there's a section in my book, it's called What's the Rush? One thing about it is like, there's some tattoo artists that are really, really fast and really, really good, but they're doing something that, most of that is not realistic tattoos, like there's a lot of guys that could do a back piece in like 4 hours, but it's not realistic, it's like some of like the Japanese type of work. But color realism, man, you gotta just kind of take your time. I mean, the more experience that you get and the more portraits that you do or more animals that you do, the faster you're gonna get, because it starts just to come like second nature. I mean, I even catch myself sometimes going a little bit too fast, and I have to tell myself to slow down, especially when I'm using these coil machines. Because like what I've told people in the past, like the way I see it is like the Numa is like a Ferrari. Really solid fucking car, right? I mean, everybody would love to have a Ferrari, right? Or drive a Ferrari. But coils are like top fuel dragsters. So, which are awesome too. So I've noticed that it packs that ink in there pretty fast. So sometimes I gotta tell myself to slow down, But somebody doesn't look at a tattoo and be like, I like it, it's a good piece, and then they find out how long it took. Oh, it took 9 hours. Oh, I don't like it anymore. Because it took 9 hours, They still think it's freaking completely awesome,
When you're doing 9-hour tattoos, do you try and get them all done? Like, do you ever have to throw any hard outline in there for next time, or?
I won't stick a hard outline because I'm not finishing it. I mean, I'll usually map things in with my shader, like instead of outlining this leaf, I'm doing kind of what I'm doing, because you could do this pretty quick and it keeps edges a little bit softer, because if it had hard lines, then you might struggle a little bit more to hide those lines, because there's no real hard lines in real life, or at least outlines, I don't have an outline around my face. Another thing with hair that you never want to make hair too perfect, where it's like each hair is evenly spaced, evenly the same thickness, because it just starts to look fake, like each one of these like hairs that I'm doing, different thickness, different length. One going one direction, one going the other.
Different wrist movement.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely going like more side to side. Usually when I'm doing it though too, I'm still kind of on that angle where it's not completely like side to side like a razor, because I'm still kind of at a slight angle, if that makes any sense.
What are some things that you do to keep the stencil from wiping off?
Stencil stuff. Plain and simple.
Okay, so
I mean, I'm still being like
using
careful.
wiping alcohol, first of all, that's the hand sanitizer. That's probably as important as using. Without using that before the stencil stuff, it doesn't last as long, nearly as long.
No, it still does, but it helps. No, stencil stuff was designed. I mean, like, it is my product, and it's mine and Mario Rosenau's, and we spent a lot of time like just getting that stuff right, you know, like a lot of back and forth with testing, and it was designed to hold stencils on for a long time, you know. Get people away from like using deodorant sticks, you know, which is totally not sanitary, you know, even if you do clean off the end of it, you know what I mean? And then there's people that use green soap, but this stencil, I mean, it's not completely ruined. Like, I'd be able to reapply this, and I have, like, you know, not getting in the correct spot. You could reapply that thing, you know, I've gone up to probably like 8 times without having to make another stencil. You know, you use green soap, that thing's destroyed after the first time.
By the 8th placement, you probably want to smack that guy.
Oh yeah.
I get frustrated after one. Yeah.
So yeah, and then you know, we have the spray stuff too, which I don't really do that much freehanding. I mean, a little bit if it's like clouds or some leaves sometimes, or, you know, little things here and there. I don't do anything too crazy with freehand, not yet. I'll be there soon. I just like to get it perfect, you know, and have a nice stencil, and it's a little bit more relaxing, I think. But spray stuff was designed for, you know, marker drawings. You could use Sharpies, pens, whatever you typically use. It was designed to hold, you know, if this was all done with Sharpie, then I just, you know, about 10 inches away, just a really light mist over it, and it'll hold it in place better. You know, it's not a solid fix, but it definitely buys you more time, which, you know, is valuable.
Should you use spray stuff over a stencil?
You can. But, I mean, if you're using stencil stuff, then you don't really need to do that. I have ran into a couple occasions where I was doing something where, you know, where the stencil was coming off. And that's, like I was saying earlier, if it's really humid outside, or somebody's like sweating a lot, you know, the stencil, or, you know, you're wiping too much, that stencil could come off. So I have used the spray stuff. You know, you just kind of really want to back off because, you know, you are spraying something over, you know, but there's really no need to do it at the beginning. But you do want to be careful with like getting things airborne, you know, with the spray. So it's not the best thing to do in the world to do it, but it was also designed for that because it's perfectly safe to spray it over an open wound.
Spray stuff is.
Yeah.
So if you need a Sharpie, a tattoo that you're already working on, as long as you use a new Sharpie, you should be able to spray stuff over the existing tattoo.
Wait, say that again?
Like, if you've already started a tattoo but you want to draw on it more, Is that what you're saying? Why it would be okay for an open wound? Or
Well, no, let's say at this point, let's say my stencil was just completely like wiping away for some reason. Like I could get out my spray stuff and spray a light mist and it'll help it stay on there, you know, if it's really humid or something. Or if you're really sweating or if it's really hot and muggy in here. That's the times that I've seen it, you know. But you don't really want to get into a habit of it. It's more used for draw on the skin, spray it, give it about 10 minutes to dry, and then tattoo, you know. I was saying earlier, it's good to keep this handy, you know, don't just throw that away. Because sometimes there's certain lines that you could get mixed up on what is what. And, you know, quick little, I know what's what now. As you can see, there's a lot more darkness that I'm putting in here that's not on my reference. So especially with an animal, something like this, you don't have to worry about it copying it exactly, you know. For one thing, I mean, it's great. I mean, I've gone to the zoo and taken a lot of, you know, my own reference photos, you know, at the zoo, which is probably technically the best thing to do. But, you know, I did get this image, you know, I bought it off online to use it, and you could go home and do the same thing if you want, and you could get, you know, or somebody that's watching this could go and actually buy this, you know. So I just want to change it up as much as possible. You know, there might be somebody else on the other side of the world that just bought the same thing and is doing the same thing, and I just want to make sure that mine's going to be different, you know. And like I said before, you know, it's just like this stencil, the reference is just like a, kind of like a grid. I'm kind of holding off on doing the rest of that because I think I'm going to get out my 9 mag bug pen for that, just to make the hairs a little bit more accurate, a little finer. Like all of that hair is pretty much ready. I'll probably start dipping in like a dark purple, blue, or the browns. You know, the hair's more brown in that picture. Here again, I haven't completely decided on what color, you know. A lot of that stuff I'll just do just at the moment, you know, when I get to it. It's good to clean out your tube, say every like 10-15 minutes at least. Make sure you're not getting some crazy buildup in there. That's gonna drive you nuts later. The one thing that's nice about if your stencil's staying on there really good, you can really jump around, not worry about losing stuff. See, I'm resorting to this because I got a few lines here that could possibly be hair or it could be wrinkles. So I could see right here some of those lines, the certain shape of them that's telling me that it's a wrinkle. So I'm going to treat it just a little bit different. It's going to be darker on one edge and feathered out on the edge closer to me. Almost basically like a hair, but later on when I blend off of it, it'll look a little different. Hopefully.
Well, you're gonna shoot through the cord? I'd maybe do it from the other side. Yeah, do it from like the side over here or something so the wire's not even moving.
If it ends up looking like hair, then I might treat it like hair later on too. See how it goes. Most of my tattoos that I do are done in one sitting, one session, done and complete. Like, I usually tell people if we could get the opportunity to go back into it, it's just going to get better. I think any tattoo, any style, I honestly, I don't care what it is, if you go back into it a second time, it's just going to be better. Some people might argue with me on that one, but it's the truth. I could look at every tattoo that I have on my body, and I have many different types of styles, and if it were to have another pass on it, I know for a fact it would look better. So, and it also, especially if a piece doesn't have a lot of darks, you want to build up those tones to get it to last a long time and to make it look good a long time, you know. Kind of a funny thing because I kind of used to like really laugh at that statement because people would look at, you know, realistic work or my work, be like, oh, that's not going to hold up over time. And it's like, then I would just really laugh at that because it's like, honestly, like, what is holding up over time? Like, lasting for eternity?
Yeah.
You know, we all die. I'm sorry to say we die. So at the most, you want it to last, you know,
40 years, 50 years.
40, 50 years. I mean, what's the harm in coming back 20 years later for a touch-up, you know? I mean, that's job security. But I have, you know, I do tattoo slightly different than I used to, and it is because of people saying that, and, you know, I see realistic work healed and years later now, and it is important to, you know, bump up those contrasts, you know.
Do you think that what is it that makes a tattoo age worse without such good contrast?
What makes it age worse?
Well, like, what is it about, you know, 20 years of life that'll make a tattoo not hold up?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the way that the person's taking care of it, and if if the dude's a surfer, I mean, any tattoo is gonna look like crap if it's in the sun every single day, or like if a welder's welding. I mean, there's all different types of jobs or activities that could mess up your tattoo. So, I mean, I think all tattoos, I mean, no matter what, I mean, they do age. I mean, that's just the way it is, But I think it's the lacking of darks, and it's kind of like the darks it's kind of like acting like an outline. But it's, just chunks of color. Like that that line that I just did, it's kind of his upper lip. I could do it with a liner, but this way keeps it a lot softer looking. It's like a line that's already like smoothed out,
I noticed that you keep rotating your machine while you're shading in. Even the line, instead of doing it sideways from side to side with your machine, you're actually rotating the tip of your machine around so that the needle is hitting in different directions.
Yeah.
Almost constantly.
And I think it's those needle movements that are important for people to practice. Just still continuing kind of with the same thing. Just more hair.
What do you do for really dark contrasts in a portrait when you can't throw dark black on the face like you do on the face?
Then you just want to resort to another dark color, like such as dark purple, dark blue, dark green, whatever colors you're working with, just the darkest value that you could go with that color. I think even though it's not chunks of black, it's still dark colors and it's still gonna hold up pretty good, And that's where, like, if you do a second sitting on it, you're sticking in a whole new layer of darks, When I do a second sitting on something, like, I don't just go in and like touch up the eyes or, just touch up spots that, are just got lighter, I usually go over the entire thing. Like, if we were to go back into this again, we would be completely going over it. But the most important thing when you go back into a piece is darkening the darks and hitting the white highlights again. If you just did that, you could be fine. It just depends on how much you want to put into it. Like, a lot of times, if the piece is too big and I know for a fact I'm not going to get it done in one sitting, then I'll just kind of map it in, which just kind of shading things in rather than outlining it. Like, this could almost be like mapped in, it's
You'd be able to fill the spaces later.
Yeah, it's basically you tattoo everything that you really need, like all your like guidelines, basically, like to where the stencil could be gone and you could go back and finish it. I'm gonna go into, I had black, I'm gonna go into some of that power blue, Instead of black on the side of this face, black hair, I'm gonna go with like a dark blue. But it's real dark because I had a lot of black in there too. Like if you're doing a portrait and you're just mapping it in for the first sitting, you want to make sure that you never like gray line smooth transitions of like facial features. You know, like cheekbone, for example, you know, you never want to like gray line it or stick any type of line around it because you're going to have a struggle trying to hide that line, you know. That's why you just would just shade in those shapes. You know, even if it's light, you know, just so you could see it.
That line's going to be almost impossible to get rid of.
Yeah, I mean, I've done it. Like when I first started doing this type of stuff, you know, I didn't have like DVDs or any type of real instruction, you know. But the guy that taught me, he was doing a lot of like pinups. So I kind of started with pinups before I went to portraits. And I've done it. I've outlined like cheekbones and all that stuff with a light like 1-drop gray. And even that is like a complete struggle. Like that's a big no-no. You can't do that because you're gonna end up having to go way too dark on something that's supposed to be kind of light. You know?
So that's the difference between realism and an illustrative style.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna get out a smaller mag for some of this smaller areas. Try out this new machine. Usually I'll start out by turning my machine as low as possible to where it still sounds good, you know? You almost want to go off of sound more than like what the volts are saying, you know? I'm at 6.7 with this one and I was almost at 9 volts a minute ago with the other one, you know? I'm gonna go just straight dark blue now. So this was darker like blackish blue, now we're just straight into some power blue. Get away with just turning it down even more. It's a pretty harsh transition. It goes like dark and then like blue. So I'm gonna bring down some of this blue coming off of the tips of these to transition it a little bit softer. It's going to be a lot of blue in this piece. Another thing why I like going in a full circle with faces, especially portraits, is, and I've said it before, like, it kind of helps me because I think to myself, okay, now I'm done with all of this kind of non-important stuff. I mean, it's all important, but it's less important than the face. So I like to get everything kind of out of the way so I could relax and kind of like focus on the face and know that that's all I got left. And you know, because if I do the face first and then I know all of this stuff, I might subconsciously like rush the face to get to the other stuff, knowing like, oh my gosh, I still got all these leaves to do and I got all this hair, and you know, so because I know when I get to the face, I know I'm not going to rush that. Now that's done enough up there for now. I'm gonna jump back down here with some of that dark blue. Kind of fine tune some of the stuff that I did with the bigger mag to get a little bit tighter. We'll talk about color theory for a little bit, or at least color theory that I know. I mean, there's different types of color theory, but you know, I work with like complementary colors a lot. Said it in my book and my other DVD, but you know, putting a color's opposite or complementary color, people call it either opposite or complementary colors. If you look at a color wheel, if there's, you know, orange is on this side, blue is on the opposite side, so that's the opposite or complementary color. You know, like green and red. That's why you see like, you know, red rose with some green around it looks so good. It's because they're complementary colors, you know. So I'm sure you've seen it in my work. You know, I used to do like the orange and blue combo a lot. Like I kind of call them combos. Got to a point where I was kind of getting sick of it, so I stopped using it so much. But you know, it's good to at least be educated within, you know, color theory and know what your complementary colors are, know what colors you could get if you mix them with certain colors, you know.
Using complementary colors also gives it more contrast.
But what it does is, they say that if you put, okay, let's talk like orange and blue for example right now. If I were to put orange next to blue, then they're gonna look more like striking, I guess you could say. If it was, let's say the orange was next to green, it wouldn't be, it makes it like more vibrant, I guess, you know. Just by doing that, it's, you know, almost like optical.
Or what kind of colors do you prefer for the different, like based on the piece, for the maybe the tonal ranges, like red meaning a certain thing or blue meaning a certain thing? Colors in there.
I mean, it kind of just depends on what you like or what the outcome of it, you know, what you want it to look like. And also, you know, kind of taking artistic freedom to it and, you know, seeing how, making it how you know, kind of like getting your point across as an artist. You know, like, I use a lot of blue in most of my pieces, and, you know, they say that blue is kind of like a calm color, you know, and I'm kind of like a calm person, so I think maybe that's why, you know. And then you see some of those like you know, evil guys that do like evil stuff, you know, they use a lot of red and orange and yellow, like fire, hell, you know, that type of stuff. You know, like blues are like more heavenly, I guess you could say, you know. So I put a lot of thought into that too. Like, I like to have that feeling. Another thing with it too is certain colors, you know, show distance better. Like that's why I use a lot of like blues in the background and cool colors, because stuff farther away tends to look blue. Like if you were to look at like a mountain range like really far away, you'll notice that the mountain range that's closer is kind of more brown. The one that's farther away is almost like blue, periwinkle, you know. So that's why I use a lot of blues like in my backgrounds, you know, just to show distance and give it a little bit of atmosphere. And same thing on the flip side of that, like hot colors, warm colors, pull forward. So if you want something to come at you, you could use warm colors. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Another thing that you could do too with complementary colors is mixing them together to get certain colors, you know, like if you mix them together, it's weird, like I've tried it, like it depends on how like pure the actual color is, but like if you mix some green and red together, like sometimes it'll come out, it kind of neutralizes it to where it's either like in the brown family or in the gray family. Just kind of depends on what actual colors you're using. But you could mix some of those sometimes to do some cool, like almost like skin tone colors, you know? Or if you need to like darken orange, you could mix some blue with it. Or if you want to darken red, you know, dab it in the green. Using complementaries, you could darken.
Sounds almost like
color.
you're trying to use every other color to get the color that you want it to look like without using that color.
Well, I mean, and that's another way to keep things rich looking too. Instead of using black to darken red, if you use green, it comes out as a richer color. You know what I mean?
Different tones.
Yeah, it's just richer looking.
You like that new machine?
Yeah, so far I'm liking it. It's definitely soft. The reason why I like purple so much because it seems like it mixes with pretty much any color. If you're ever like mapping in a piece and you're not sure like what color to use like you know, purples or lavenders. Because next time you go back into it, you could pretty much pick any color and it's going to blend into it nicely.
Do you have to keep yourself from overworking a certain area so that you keep up a certain pace?
Like that I don't overwork this area compared to up there, as far as like skin damage is concerned, or just getting.
Well, I guess originally I was thinking of skin damage, but now more so even just for like
The sake of the piece?
overall, yeah, sameness.
No, because I know that when I get up to those sections, I kind of know what I did down here, and I know what I have to do, you know, to kind of get it to match. You know, just as long as the whole piece is solid and those colors are consistently flowing, then should be good. I mean, as far as like not overworking the skin that much, I mean, most of this stuff is just one pass, you know? Or it becomes more passes, you know, as I'm blending and stuff like that, but you just gotta know what you've hit, you know, and if you've worked an area too hard, you kind of know. Doing little details in the lips. Doing some with the mag, and I'll do some with the liner later on. Some of like the little dots. Just a little pink above this too that I'm gonna make sure I get. And it's pretty light, like on there, that pink. I'm gonna go with some more blue, kind of like what I was doing down here, over here. Then, I think I'm gonna go with some brown in all this open hair. It's a real light hair, like a light brown. So they'll stand out.
See the bottom, it's on the bottom half of the flat.
Periwinkle, a little of that royal blue. Just gonna go another minute, some of this blue, and then take a little break. And then I think I'm gonna start with the brown in the hair. And maybe we'll get on the green, knock that out. All right, let's clean it off, stretch out for a couple minutes.
prefer to work? What's your favorite situation? How many hours per session? How many sessions usually?
Usually, I mean, it depends on the piece. I like getting, I like doing pieces that are like this size, you know? If you're doing somebody's face, it's got to be a certain size in order for it to like really get all those good details in there and really make it, you know, look really cool. If you go too small, it's almost like you're like, you know, dot for an eye, you know, and it's like, you know. And that, you know, doing it bigger too is gonna hold up better too.
Do you think that too many people try and do portrait tattoos too small?
It's possible, you know, it's like sometimes you can't really tell how small it is like in a picture. You know, that's why a lot of times like, I usually tell people like if I'm critiquing a portfolio, like the actual portfolio itself, like not to black out the entire background because you don't know what spot it is on the body, you don't know how big it is, and it's kind of cool to like see how big it is and like where it's at on the body. So, I mean, yeah, I mean it's definitely a lot harder to do, you know, a small little portrait. I mean, of course it's doable. It's easier in black and gray, you know, I think. Although it's still hard. But it's not just because it's easier, bigger, to go bigger, but you know, you could get in there and do some nice detail work. But I do like to get it done in one sitting, like, usually like, I haven't done too many like full back pieces, you know, I have done them, but you know, every time I start like a really big project like that, I end up getting kind of discouraged on it, and you know, it's like months down the road, you know, it's like you're still working on it, and it's like, oh gosh, I'm kind of over this, you know. It's kind of cool to like get in there, do a piece, get done, get the picture, post it up, you know, be done, you know. Or what's even worse is starting a big project on somebody and the guy ends up being kind of a douchebag, you know? And then it's like, you just committed to something that you're gonna spend so much time with them. You know, this way, like if I hate your guts, like I'm never gonna tattoo you again, I don't have to, you know?
That's probably the best part about this job. So if somebody wanted to get tattooed by you, what would you recommend for them to do?
Best thing to do, I mean, just email me. If it's like a portrait you want, attach the picture. And it's like, if I'm into it, I pretty much reply to all my emails, whether or not I don't like the idea, you know, I'll still reply. Sometimes it's just to send you in the right direction to get it done, you know, recommend another artist to do it. You know, there's a lot of pieces that people want by me, but it's like, you know, my buddy over here could do it, you know, just as good. You know, but if it's like a portrait and they really want me to do it, you know, I do it. But the best way to go about it is email me. And if it's not a portrait, just, you know, explain your idea and I'll get back to you.
You go to a lot of conventions, there's a lot of people always at your booth. It's usually really busy. Do you think a lot of people see you at conventions and then want to come get tattooed right away? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think doing conventions is a good thing to do, you know, especially if you want to get out there and get busier, you know, especially if you're doing good work at the convention. If you're not ready to go to a convention and, you know, you don't want to go there and do, you know, bad tattoos, that'd not be good, you know, or even if they're just mediocre, I would spend more time focusing at your shop, get better, then go in the convention circuit, you know. You know, because if you're doing bad work, then obviously it doesn't matter, you know, whether or not a lot of people see you or not. But once you think you're there, yeah, conventions are great. I mean, conventions are cool and everything, but it is really hard. I mean, it's just hard in general. You know, you don't have a cushioned seat usually. It doesn't have wheels on it. The lights suck. You know, you're struggling to see. You know, I've been to conventions where, you know, it's open till midnight and their lights are so dim you cannot see. Like we had to rush to the store to buy a light. You know, it's like you're trying to tattoo, you're trying to do the best you could do, and you're struggling with all these other elements, you know. It's tough. You know, your back gets thrown out because you're bent over because you can't raise the seat, or your client's in a bad position, so then, you know, you struggle to get into a good position, you know.
Do you spend a lot of time while you're tattooing thinking about your positioning, like how comfortable you are?
No, you know, sometimes you just gotta sacrifice your body. Because there's just certain parts of the body, you know, like I can't stand tattooing like necks. I mean, I think a lot of people don't like it. I mean, there's some people that really love it, but I think it's the position, man. I just can't get them in that good position, you know? It just throws out my back. I feel like I'm 90. All right, let's get on some different color. So within where all these hairs are, I don't want to go too dark or else I'll just get lost. So I'm going to do that sienna. Actually, I didn't pour, wait, I think that's sienna. I'm going to do brown, confusion. I think that's sienna. Maybe a little bit of this. That's a good little combo for skin tone too. I guess it would be a good mid-tone for a portrait. And then you could have your dark brown and your, you know, a darker chocolate brown mixed in with a little bit of purple for your darks, and then keep mixing down this direction for your lighter tones. But when I first started tattooing, I was actually in my apprenticeship, and Jim, he was doing a lot of pinups, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of pinups, and right when I was apprenticing, like, he did a realistic portrait of Carmen Electra on my hand. So I mean, it definitely came from Jim. You know, he was doing paintings of like musicians, or he was doing paintings of like the rock stars and portraits, you know, and I remember going to the bookstore and getting a magazine, tattoo magazine, and I saw some of Tom Renshaw's work. And I actually took the magazine to Jim during my apprenticeship and asked him, like, how the heck is this guy doing this? Like, and actually it was like, I think a gorilla, and there was just like a million little dots for the hair. And I'm like, is there some like special tool he's using for this or what? And he's like, no, it's just, he's actually just doing every single dot, you know, like, no special tool for it, it's just takes time. And so, I mean, Tom Renshaw, he was a big influence, you know. Started with Jim, and then, you know, I saw some of, like, Bob Tyrell's work, and his stuff, you know, speaks for itself. Then, Corey Kedney was doing some sick portraits, awesome realistic work. So, that really caught my attention. And, you know, at that time I was doing pinups, and I've tried a couple portraits here and there. I mean, I wasn't like super good at them or anything, but I definitely loved doing it, you know. But when I first started, I was just like everybody else. Like, I was doing kanji, I was doing tribal. There's half-sleeve tribal Mike DeVries pieces walking around out there. You know, everything. Japanese work, you know, and it just ended up evolving into this, you know.
So how does realism apply then to other tattoos that aren't necessarily portraits?
Well,
Do you do tattoos that aren't portraits?
yeah, I do, but I still like to have realistic elements to it, just because like it just kind of has become, you know, my niche, I guess you could say. So
So you're almost always referring back to like a straight photo reference of some sort.
no, it's not that I always use reference. I mean, I do a lot, but you know, I do some other custom type stuff, and I keep telling myself to like get off your ass and do more of it, you know, because I think honestly, and I'll say it, like I'll feel, you know, like I'm, you know, don't half-ass it, don't get all lazy, you know. It's sometimes I think it comes down to laziness, you know, instead of spending time to draw something.
I think in particular the one tattoo you're doing of some hummingbirds and flowers as a whole sleeve on a girl.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a portrait, but it's still very much realism.
Yeah.
How do you apply the realism technique to doing other subject matter?
Well, it's as easy as just going on Google and getting images, you know, and then, but there again, it goes back to being different and change it up, you know. That's most important. And it also comes down to like, it's what pretty much everybody asks me for too, you know, is portraits and realistic tattoos. So it's like, I have gotten kind of stuck with doing them, you know, but I do love it. But I do feel like it's getting to that time where I need to start changing it up a little bit, you know.
Is there anything you'd want to, like, would be interested in trying to work on more in particular?
Just more custom stuff, more custom drawings, more stuff just out of my head. I mean, but I've been saying that for a long time, and that's what I'm talking about, like, you know, get kind of lazy and get caught in your ways a little bit, you know? I'm not saying that all tattoo artists that do realistic work are lazy. That's not what I'm trying to say. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, you just want to do better.
Yeah, you
There's always room to do better.
that, and you know, I've been doing, I mean, there's months go by where it's like I do portrait every single day. You know, it's almost kind of like, okay, you know, I've kind of comes to a time where it's like, all right, I gotta try something new, you know, getting kind of bored.
So then throw some stuff out there so that our wonderful viewers can hit you up.
Just throw out some ideas, you know? Could be completely off the wall.
That sounds like a challenge.
Yeah. Always down for a challenge. So just dipped into black. Just doing some more hairs at the top of his face here. lot of respect for the guys that do a lot of custom work and actually take all that time to draw back pieces and all that, you know. It's like there's a lot of time involved in that, you know. Turn this way low. I dip back in the dark blue. I'm just gonna kind of hit some lighter areas. Probably looks solid, possibly in the camera, but just a little bit light. So I'm just gonna kind of fill it. I'm about ready to start on the green.
What are your feelings on Bactine?
Bactine. Well, I know you were asking me when we were on break that if we could use Bactine on you. And I said no. Well, for one, if I were to spray Bactine on this, the stencil would be gone. It really is bad at this stage. I mean, I could sit there and put some on a paper towel and try and get it like there if I wanted to, but make sure you never like wipe over the whole thing because it'll destroy the stencil. Actually, Jeff Johnson, I don't know if he came up with it himself or if he saw it somewhere, showed me this new thing. If you go buy like a foam bottle like that, I think you get some, I think Dial soap makes it. I'm sure you could get just empty bottles of it too, but we bought bottles of Dial soap that, you know, were pump foam bottles, and clean it out, clean all the soap out of it, you know, basically get it empty, and pour a couple bottles of Bactine in it and use it as a foam. But I'll usually use it once I'm not worried about the stencil, you know, then you don't have to spray it. You know, the spray is no good because you're gonna get, you know, possible airborne contamination. You know, you don't want to be breathing that stuff. It sprays it on and goes into your face. So you want to be really careful on that. You could get the Bactine in not a spray. It's just like the little squirt bottle. So I would just, you know, saturate a paper towel really good and then just wipe it on. Let it sit for a couple minutes, and you know, I can't really use it till the end because, you know, I still have like a lot of stencil to worry about. And usually by that time it's like they're either just like, just get it done, you know, and then I end up not using it. But if they're in a lot of pain, you know, it's definitely helps people get through it, you know. All right, let's do some green. I want to make sure I get this nice and clean for when it's sitting over here. Don't get all dried up in there. Back with the 17 mag. This is the color that I poured out. This is the color that I poured out after I was pouring my palette. It's olive from Eternal. It's kind of like a good mucky kind of dark green. Go right into that mean green. I'll do that every now and then, go ahead and dab in the water. Kind of helps get things smoother, a little more ease. You don't want to water it down too much, you know. Go into that other green. Big like back and forth movements. Really not too worried about getting too detailed with this. Just kind of helps the piece have some flow to it. I'm sure you all have heard it before that it's all about the flow. Another thing to keep in mind too, like if you have your machine flowing in fast movements like this, you're not doing a whole lot of damage compared to if you were just sitting there going really slow and doing small circles, like packing it in. You know, this is kind of like a brush effect, you know, and I think that's a big way to get things smooth. And then you could, you know, don't be afraid to go over what you've done, you know, to smooth things out and to layer it.
Are you using a lot of water while you layer it?
Depends on how much I want to layer it. But I've been using a lot less water than I used to. Because if you use too much water, then you're, you know, causing damage and no ink is going in, you know?
Yeah.
And I think the less water that you use, the more solid it's gonna look. You know, I've been trying to get my tattoos to look more solid. You know, and I think kind of looks better, you know? I mean, some people, actually recently somebody told me that, you know, my tattoos look different nowadays than they did, you know, even a couple years ago. And I would absolutely agree with that. It's because I am doing it different. But I think it's evolving into a better way, a little better system. One thing I could talk about is another thing that comes along with the, I guess you could say, the experience is tattooing tan skin, or, you know, darker skin. What I found that happens when tattooing monochromatic pieces, especially the gray monochromatic, if it's tattooed on dark skin, it kind of heals a little funny, you know, because it's treated like a fully saturated color piece, and those really light grays are really hard to get, and then it gets transitioned into lighter grays with a lot of white, and then all the way down to like a lot of white. So, and we all know how white heals on dark skin. You know, it could pose a problem. Could turn brown. So just want to be careful with that. Like if somebody comes to me with dark skin and they ask for that, I talk them out of it, tell them that it's, you know, a lot of maintenance. You know, you're probably going to have to come in for definitely a second sitting, and possibly a couple years down the line, you're going to have to come in and get it worked on again. You know, and hopefully it doesn't turn brown within that time. So just something to think about. As far as other monochromatic tattoos, like, it's kind of the same, you know, because it gets so whited down towards your light tones. Just works best on light skin. And if you're doing, actually, the trick that I was showing on the Photoshop had to colorize a picture, and you go to hue and saturation, and then click colorize. That's a good way to get your reference. If it's a black and gray picture, you can almost turn it black and gray, and then click that colorize button, play with the hue and saturation, and you could get it basically monochromatic, and you could print it out, and it's really helpful. I mean, I used to do it without Photoshop, but might as well. I mean, computer's sitting right there, you know. It helps. And sometimes if I'm doing a monochromatic tattoo, let's say I'm doing a monochromatic blue monkey, let's just say, for example, You don't have to do just blue, even though mono means, you know, one color. Like I would use some dark purples in the dark areas. Or if you're doing like something monochromatic that's all different greens, you could use a really dark blue or a dark purple in the shadow areas. It kind of just helps make it look a little bit more striking, a little more fun to look at. The same goes with the gray monochromatic. I mean, I've done some of those pieces, you might have seen them, where it's got a lot of like blue to it, where it's monochromatic. I'm sure saying monochromatic a lot, aren't I?
Mm-hmm.
Another word for it.
I don't know. I mean, that's really it. Is it something that a lot of people come to you for?
Yeah. They're fun tattoos to do.
A little bit more stylized.
A little bit more stylized, especially if it's something that has been done before and you know it's been done a million times. Like, then say, hey, let's do it, you know, like this or like this. Yeah, like, I always explore all the options with my client, like, at the beginning. If they got dark skin, I'm gonna explore the option of doing black and gray. You know, if they're really set on color, we could do black and gray with some hints of color, you know, just to kind of like accent it. You know, just have fun with it. So what I was saying about the gray pieces, fully saturated gray, like you could, sometimes the gray comes out a little blue, but you could actually push that a little bit more and add blue in the gray, or have caps of blue sitting next to it that you mix, you know? And that's where, like, on that, might have seen it, like one of the Bob Marley tattoo that I did, where it had some orange, because the orange is blue's opposite, so I stuck the orange in the background, put a little bit of orange on the side of its face, make the setting correct so it looks like it's in that environment. So it kind of makes sense, you know, orange sky or whatnot in the background, and then it's shining on the side of his face. So that's why I chose that, it's because of the complementary color. But you could do it with, you know, you could mix green with, you could mix, you all right? You can mix gray with green, or, I mean, there's so many different color variations that you could do, you know? It started to bog down a little bit, so just clean it out. It's starting to make a little bit of a mess. I usually wipe them down pretty often.
We're at like just over 2 hours.
Okay. As you can see, I'm not really trying to duplicate what I did in Photoshop. Just don't be stuck to your reference. Get back in that olive. How's it feeling, Nate?
Feels good.
Still with me? So what's the hardest thing when you do a portrait? What's the hardest thing?
Keeping the stencil on the whole time.
Really?
Yeah, and after that, I would say using enough dark. There's not enough depth. Usually I won't use enough dark. Or at least I won't get started using enough dark, and then I'll have to go over stuff I've already done later in the tattoo again with more dark. So I probably need to get into the darks faster than I...
Well, you want to start with your darks, you know? I mean,
or just have darker darks from the start. Because I'll usually start with more of a mid-tone. If you're thinking.
yeah, I mean, yeah, one good way to check your values and to make sure that you're using the right amount of darks and lights is squint your eyes. Like, I could squint my eyes right now and see that, you know, these leaves are definitely standing out compared to it's not getting lost, you know? That's the main thing, you don't want things getting lost. I think the biggest problem that people usually have is the nose always gets lost. Like if you squint your eyes at it, it completely disappears. And that's where, when you're doing it, just squint your eyes. If it's lost, just add a little bit more darkness underneath it, you know? Just darken that highlight a little bit, or darken the shadow underneath it a little bit more. And it'll pull that nose forward, you know? People are afraid to stick those darks like on the side, you know? Just can't be afraid and just do it.
The practice helps also, I think. You know, the more I practice on with paints or with colored pencils or not tattooing, the more I've done it, the more practice I get and the less scared I am to use those darker colors.
Well, yeah. Definitely all comes down to practice. Can't become a black belt if you don't practice karate.
It's something I gotta take up then.
Another thing, how I was talking about earlier about keeping your colors flowing, I'm gonna dab into a little bit of blue. Let's clean it out, got a little muddy. Go. Some periwinkle, some royal blue. Just gonna brush a little bit of it over this green. remember when I first started working with color, I would mix a lot of my own ink, like in different bottles, just to see what colors like mixed well with others, and make custom colors. I think it really helped like to figure out what colors go good with other colors, and you know, even if you're not tattooing, pour out a bunch of color and just sit here and intermix and see what you come up with. Could do it with paint too.
How are you able to keep this? I noticed after I've been tattooing for a long time that it gets really hard to stay focused on all of the little details after looking at the same thing for 6 hours straight. So what do you do that makes it so that you can stay focused on all of the little details for the entire length of the tattoo without ever kind of speeding up or trying to get through it, or maybe get to something else earlier?
You just gotta have patience. What do you think about that answer?
I handed that one to you. I'm throwing softballs at you. So how long did you spend sitting in the gorilla room at the zoo before you finally did? Do you use any book reference anymore, or are you like doing everything off the internet now?
Yeah, when I first started tattooing, I was at the bookstore at least once a week. Because that's what Jim was doing, you know?
Totally.
I was going to the bookstore all the time with him.
And you know exactly which books have what pictures and what plants and what animals and what pinup girls and...
Yeah. I mean, it depends on what I'm doing. I mean, if it's a flower or something, I'd much rather take my own photo reference. You know, but if it's a gorilla, you know, I like, you know, search the web for the best thing that you can find. You know, and you know, the iStock photo is a great tool, you know. Pretty much the best, like, Flash library that you could possibly find, you know. I mean, you gotta pay for it, but what's $5, you know?
Yeah. Do you have any like formal art education?
My formal art education actually didn't start till after I was tattooing for a few years. Then I took a couple classes at the art center in Pasadena, which is a great school. I mean, I recommend to anybody, like, dude, if you want to get better at art, man, there's some good classes out there. I learned so much. Took a figure drawing class, taken a head and hands class where it just focuses on the head and hands. And I learned a lot in that class. Like I was saying earlier, there's a lot of books that kind of teach you that stuff, you know? Figure drawing, head and hands, awesome stuff. Especially if this is like something that you want to do and get into. But before that, it was just basic art classes in school, you know?
Given everything that like has changed for you over the last few years and where you've gotten to now, like where do you see everything going in the next 5 years?
Next 5 years, huh?
10 years.
Well, I'm always going to be tattooing, that's for sure. I would like to tattoo a little bit less, you know, just because of the back and the hands, you know?
You have quite the demand.
Yeah.
Put it nicely.
Quite the demand.
Yeah. Well, what's coming up? What's in the future?
I don't know, I kind of hope to be doing like the same thing, you know? Like, just tattoo a lot. I'd love to have more time to paint. It's just kind of the last thing I want to do after I've been tattooing all day is to go home and paint, you know? I know one thing on my list, man, I need to start spending more time with the family, you know? Because I've been busting my ass for, you know, a good amount of years now, and I have a son, you know, I'm married, and I like to spend more time with them, you know? Which I have been lately, you know, a lot more than I used to. But finding out, you know, just as they get older, like how important that is. I'd like to keep making the books. Think about the books, like making like how I just came out with the, or how Tattoo Prodigies, you know, that was a lot of work. I worked on it for about a year and a half. From the minute that I started collecting images from everybody and to getting the books, you know, delivered to me, it was about a year and a half. And it felt very rewarding, you know, like you really accomplished something. So it's pretty cool. Like growing up, I remember my grandpa wrote a book, and I was always intrigued by that. Like, damn, dude, he wrote a book. Like, that's crazy. So I remember one of my clients a while back, actually a pretty good friend of mine now, his name's Big Dave. He does like bodyguard training, and he wrote a big bodyguard training manual. And when I was tattooing him several years back, he's like, dude, you should need to do like a, you know, a tattoo instructional book, you know? And that's kind of why I started with the Let's Be Realistic book. So I'd like to do more of those in the future.
How do you feel about like tattoo artists sharing their techniques with each other and how it's benefiting the industry?
Well, I know there's a lot of people that are probably really pissed off about all these educational DVDs and books and stuff, and you know, it's like a lot of people think you're just trying to capitalize, you know, on the industry and that it's popular and, you know, just trying to make money. I don't know, for me, I mean, yeah, the money's great, but it's not all about the money, you know. I like teaching people things, and I like it, you know, I get a sense of fulfillment, I guess, you know, when I can teach somebody something and, you know, and it helps them.
Is teaching a big part of what you see yourself doing? So you apprenticed Caitlin, now she's working.
Yeah, she works with me.
Doing great work, and Jamie's apprenticing.
Yeah.
I definitely see that in you that you like to share.
Yeah, I mean, like when I get, you know, random dudes sometimes that are like, hey, could I sit and come and watch you? And it's like, come on in, you know. I don't mind too much on that stuff, you know. And I know it pisses some people off, but that's just one way that the industry has changed. that you know, and there's a lot less pissed off people now. I mean, if I was doing this even just 10 years ago, you know, I'd be killed. You know, but I just want to make sure that my DVD goes into the right hands, and you know, I mean, I feel like some of those guys do. Like, I don't want to just sell it to anybody and, you know, get a bunch of scratchers going out there, you know. But I also feel that just because I come out with a DVD doesn't mean that somebody's going to start tattooing. Like, if they're going to start tattooing, they're going to start tattooing. You know what I mean? It's not like, oh, Mike DeVries has a DVD, I'm going to change my career right now. You know, and a lot of the stuff in my DVD and my book, it doesn't really teach you how to tattoo. It's a little bit more advanced. So I would like to think that it is, you know. Gotta at least know the basics. What do you think about that, Nate?
When I started tattooing, I always wished there was more information that I could consume, because I would have consumed every single piece of information I could find about tattooing I found and soaked up. But it wasn't until I got my apprenticeship that I really learned what I needed to know to start tattooing.
Yeah.
And no amount of reading or video watching or digital guidance was gonna teach me the basics of what I needed to know, and I think that apprenticing was
Well, yeah,
a
definitely.
huge turning point for me. But as far as you know, the educational DVDs go, I think being a tattooer and being able to watch, you know, a real master at work on a particular style that I'm interested in is, you know, just as helpful as watching Jim tattoo someone back when I was first learning how to tattoo. Seeing how you move your wrist and seeing how the tattoo is applied, I'm able to soak that up. And if I have to watch, you know, if I'm not able to be here in person, you know, if I can watch on a DVD and still learn, that's still great.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You know, your booth is always one of the most popular ones at the tattoo convention, is because there's so many people trying to watch how you're doing what you do. And the video is only going to help them.
Yeah, and what it's doing too is it's pushing people to do better work, and then it completely like evolves to push me to do better work. You know, there's a lot of guys out there that are doing awesome, realistic work, and it pushes me, you know?
So it's definitely exploded.
Yeah, I mean, dude, I recently just got back from like China and Germany, and you know, I went to Australia this year, and I was amazed on like how much awesome work I saw out there, you know? Like, it's incredible.
Do you think that because of the internet and, you know, magazines and DVDs, and that tattooing is growing globally now, so that it's not just you know, a punk rock
I think it has to do,
or a sailor or a...
I think it mostly has to do with the internet.
Do you think the internet's doing a lot for tattooing over the last 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, that's where it's pushing people, you know? You know, this guy posts a picture that he did yesterday, and then, you know, and then you get to check it out, and I post stuff, and then it inspires somebody else, and then they post some new stuff, you know, get to work and, you know, try new things, and yeah, I mean...
How important do you think it is for tattoo artists, even newer artists, to show their work and ask for feedback, even, you know, if it's constructive criticism? The feedback alone is enough to push you and help you. Do you think it's important to have a space to put all that up and share it with everyone and try and promote it, or is it better to wait and become more confident before becoming part of that, you know?
I mean, there's, I guess, a kind of fine line there. Like, I think it's good to be doing, solid work and solid clean work before you get all involved with that stuff, You want to catch people's attention, like, right off the bat. Be like, bam, look at me. You know what I mean? Rather than, like, come out, kind of half-assing stuff, But, I mean, I used to, send pictures to magazines that if I look in the magazine and I see it in there and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I sent that in. Like,
Do they
wow.
dig up old pieces?
Yeah, there's a couple magazines out there that it could be 2 years later and they do like a feature on flower tattoos and I send a picture in, And yeah, there's been times where they use it. Like just recently I saw a piece in a new magazine, a tattoo that I did probably 5 years ago. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. But hey, you gotta start somewhere, But I do recommend that if you do send stuff to magazines, make sure that it's pretty solid,
Yeah, ask ask your friends first before. I would bring you my work before I send you my piece.
So since this hair is dark, I'm not going to bring that darkness from the background into that dark. So I want good separation there. I'm going to go with this really light green. How are you feeling?
Good. Definitely just kind of starting to get numb a little.
Yeah, this piece is definitely evolving far from this, especially the Photoshop background leaves that I was doing. That's why it's okay to change your mind.
Why did you decide to change what you did?
Well, a lot of it has to do with like this edge being dark, and I wanted to darken this a little bit darker than there to hold this edge in place to where when I highlight this edge later, it's really gonna have good poppage right there. It's gonna stand out. Same goes with up here, And plus, I didn't want to get too crazy and go on the other side of your leg, Wanted to keep it on that one side. So I figured like all this little stuff just doesn't really need to be there. I think this is going to be detailed enough that if I do detail work over here, it could take away from that.
I'm always looking for more ways to do good poppage.
Oh yeah. Poppage is what you want. little gaps where I'm not completely going to the hair. Like there's little spots where I didn't put any ink in, where later towards the end when I stick the highlights in there, I could kind of highlight some of the edges of this hair too. Because the side of this nose is really highlighted with white, that the way that the light's hitting it, it would make sense to have a little bit of light hitting that edge.
I think it's probably only makes sense that I'm like kind of wearing out of talking anyway, because you're probably gonna have a lot to say at the end, right? Like doing the whole face.
Maybe. I don't know.
Even if you just say I'm putting dark here because I need to put something bright next to it, or I'm putting something in here because I got to do something next to it, or whatever.
Yeah. Another thing too, like you just want to worry about one thing at a time. Like I think a lot of people get ahead of themselves and be like, oh my gosh, like I got all this work to do and stressed out, and you know, just take one thing at a time. Like when I'm doing this background, that's all I'm thinking about, you know? Like I might think of little things here and there about the face, but I'm mostly focused. If I'm on an area, that's the area that all my focus is on. Not really too concerned with anything else. I would be concerned with it if my stencil was wiping off. If my stencil was wiping off, I would be approaching this a little bit different. I'd probably already be in the face, you know, hitting the important parts. I'm leaving all these spots open for lighter tones. I'm either going to go in there and mix this green down with yellow or with white. Usually come across that decision every now and then, whether or not I want to lighten it with white or yellow. If you do it with yellow, it tends to be a little bit more rich looking and striking, but if you do it with white, it's a little bit softer looking, so it kind of depends on what look you're going for. And there again, I really haven't made up my mind which way. I probably tend to dip in the white and go the white direction more often than the yellow. One thing that's extremely important is customer relations. Like treating your clients good, you know, like I think a lot of tattoo artists are plain out dicks. And, you know, it's like, is that too much?
Yeah, kind of. I think it's funny, but it's honest.
Sorry if that was too much, guys. But I think customer relations and treating your client good is a really big key to success, you know? Because your client knows when you're not being a dick. It knows that you're treating them really good, you know, offer them something to drink, you know. I tend to like always end up not charging strict per minute, you know. I try not to rip anybody off. Everybody knows what they're paying, and, you know, I'm always on time. I'm always 95% of the time I'm set up, ready to go before they even get here, you know. All those little things are really important, you know. It's gonna get those customers coming back. You want to be careful. You don't see me like wiping over the whole stencil, you know. I'm still being really careful with my stencil. I also prefer to use dial soap diluted down with distilled water versus grain soap. I think it's a little more pleasing to the skin, and it also, I think, also helps with the stencil. I think green soap could be a little bit too harsh sometimes. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and throw in the lighter tones in these leaves. I'm gonna go from this light, like lime green, into white. Here again, I'm not afraid to like go over what has been done already. It's a big key to getting things smooth. This machine is hitting so soft that it's gonna heal just fine. I keep dipping back into the white just to get lighter and lighter. back into that liner screen. On average, a color portrait should probably take you no less than 3 hours. If you're doing a color portrait in 3 hours, you're going way too fast. I'd say a good amount of time is maybe 4 to 5 hours. And that's on a simple color portrait, not too crazy details, you know, pretty simple. You know, about maybe the size of this face.
You're at 3.
Yeah, we're at 3 hours now, and I've barely touched the face. Black and gray, that's a different story. You could do it a lot faster. You don't have to worry about blending so many colors and thinking what colors should go where, and you know. When you're doing that, you're just thinking, you know, your values. Same thing with that. Making sure all your values are good. Full range of darks and lights. And also it goes a lot faster because it's not fully saturated. I would like to start doing more black and gray. It's fun. It's like I talk to black and gray guys and they're like, I'd like to start getting into color, and I think it's just because we get used to something and it's just fun to go outside the box and do new things. Although I do a lot of black and gray, but definitely I get more requests for color. But I have a lot of fun with black and gray when I get to do it.
Do you get tattooed a lot still?
I recently have gotten tattooed by Nick Baxter. He started my whole chest. It's not done yet though. I need to get out there to see him. That was the last piece that I got. Before that, I got a portrait of my dog. Still not done yet though.
The life of a tattooer. Still not done.
Yeah.
Do you think it's important to keep getting tattooed? Like as a tattooer, like just to keep always remembering like what it's like?
Not so much for like sake of the pain to see what it's like, but I'll tell you what, like I started getting tattooed when I was 16. I didn't start tattooing till I was, let's see, I started tattooing in 2003. I'm 30, so that's 7 years ago. So I didn't start tattooing until I was like 23. But I kind of feel that my career started when I was 16. Because I was hanging out at the local tattoo shop like all the time, you know, which wasn't an actual shop. It was, you know, this rigged up garage. I mean, it was pretty nice though, nice little shop, nice little gig he had going, but I was there all the time getting tattooed. And when I turned 18, I was at the local shop, you know, here in the neighborhood, that all the time, that's all I was doing was getting tattooed. And I would go home and figure out my next tattoo and where I should put it, and you know, I always paid close attention to the process. So I think that really helps, that the more tattoos you get, you know, you learn something each time. Most of my tattoos that I got when I was 16, I don't even have anymore. They're all covered and have all been lasered. But I think it's all that experience, you know? A lot of it is like what not to do. Starting to run out of this green color. Should go ahead and take a break. And then I'll pour out some more green, more of that lime green. And then just got a little bit more to do in this upper leaf, kind of smooth it out a little bit more. I think these guys are good. Gets the point across that there's some leaves in front of them, you know, it's not in focus, but that's okay. And then I'll probably stick a little bit of green down here to show that there's some shrubs in front of them. And then we'll start moving on to the face.